instructions that Prabhupada is provided. Yes, we are following. However, we are following those instructions with us. We are very result conscious. Although in Krishna consciousness, we act on the basis of not being conscious of the result, right? Just say, act for the say pleasure of Krishna. That's what it is. Finished, right? So just do your best. Why are we saying that? Why we say that don't worry about the result? Because we cannot see what Krishna's reactions are, but we can know what the spiritual master's reaction is, and we know how the superior devotees can react. Therefore, when we say just work for Krishna, don't bother about the result, means don't bother about seeing how Krishna is going to react. We understand how Krishna is going to react by seeing how the spiritual master and other superiors are going to react. That's very simple as that. So we should be conscious of the fact that we're doing everything that we are practicing, that we are following in Krishna consciousness. We are following it with a definitive end result, which means every activity should please someone. Sometimes the activity could have been given by immediate superior authority. Sometimes it could have been given by the spiritual master, or sometimes some instruction which Prabhupada himself may have given, like, for example, distribute books. That's a universal instruction for all members of ISKCON. So there are universal instructions, there are specific instructions. But the idea is when we execute these instructions, we should be conscious of the fact that we are trying to please someone. So it is not merely a principle that we are following. We are interested in pleasing someone. The point is that a pure devotee of the Lord is not interested in the result per se. He is interested in the effort. But you need to please him. There's a question of what you say, okay, I did my best, end of story, let me go on to the next thing. So I did my best. Or generally we don't think we did our best. We're not supposed to think. We always supposed to think we can do better. But what we should be really concerned about is Prabhupada pleased with me? Is my spiritual master pleased with me? Are the Vaishnavas, superior Vaishnavas pleased with me? That principle should never be forgotten. So that is the benchmark for any of our activities in Krishna consciousness. So it's not a question of just mechanically doing things. For example, if you know the value of Prabhupada, you would never place his picture upside down, which is what happened here. How can you place someone so valuable in an upside down posture? There were obvious faults that were going on here. For example, putting salt in the Charanamrita, which is not to be done. It's a prohibitive thing. You're not supposed to put salt in the Charanamrita. And the final thing here, which we read so far, was how Prabhupada's name was cut short. This is a very big topic a very big topic in the sense that the minimization of what it means to minimize the founder Acharya. One is by not printing his name properly. This is a literal minimization of Prabhupada by not printing his name properly. There are also other ways in which one can minimize Prabhupada by one's conception of what Prabhupada is and representing that perfect conception also. So, for example, some time ago, a few years ago actually, there is one devotee who's pretty well situated in Krishna consciousness. He wrote an article where he said it would be wrong for the members of ISKCON to think that Prabhupada is the founder of the Kirtan movement, or in the West. He was saying that there were other yogis also who came to the West and who did some Kirtan and yoga for that matter. And so we should give them their place and we should just claim that Prabhupada was the last in that wave. In the sense, the last in the wave means he gave the analogy that the last wave is always the best wave. Now, there is a problem with this. The problem is that, let me give another analogy. You can't say that a counterfeit currency is as good as a real currency. You cannot compare a counterfeit currency with the real currency. So we cannot compare these other yogis who have brought Krishna brought yoga to the West and Kirtan to the West with Prabhupada. They were all cheaters. Prabhupada, in Prabhupada's own words, they were cheaters because they did not represent the purpose of Krishna. So Prabhupada is not the best in the last wave. The others were not even bona fide. They were not even real yogis. So Prabhupada is not the best in the last wave. We cannot even compare him with the other sadhus and the other yogis who went to the West. Prabhupada is in a distinctly different category. So the moment you put Prabhupada in the rest of the category and try, even if you try to say he's the best, still you're minimizing him because of the fact that he does not even belong to the category. You cannot say among the counterfeit notes, this note is the best. You can't, what sense does it even make? So there's counterfeit, there's something real. So when we speak about minimization of Srila Prabhupada, we should be conscious of this fact. We cannot lump Prabhupada together with the yogis and the philanthropists and all these other sets of people. No, they are all bogus. Prabhupada is bona fide. So that we need to sharply make the distinction. Especially in the Madhva line, they're very, very, I don't know how to put it. They're the most vehement critics of the Mayavada philosophy. They're also very vocally defensive, vocally in writing, very defensive of Madhvacharya. Nobody can criticize Madhvacharya. That is how it is. And in fact, they have problems even with Sri Vaishnavism, because Sri Vaishnavism, for example, Achintya Beda, that same and what different, right? So the sameness is something they have a problem with. So they only want to clearly ensure that the Lord is different from these followers. So any trace of Mayavada, no way. They just completely destroy that whole thing. I'm not that, I mean, our philosophy or the Ramanacharya's philosophy is, they understand that it is Vaishnavism, but they're not even comfortable with the fact that it's saying that the living entity is same as God also, at least qualitatively. So they want to keep that distinction very clear. They emphasize it very strongly. The Lord and the living entities are very different. So in the Madhva line, you cannot imagine at any point in time Madhva being compared with any other non-devotee yogi or things like that. They just cannot tolerate it. What to speak of, I mean, of course, even other philosophies which are Vaishnava also, they have some difficulties with the nuances. So forget about Mayavada. So we should be conscious of this fact when we say Prabhupada, we should not think him to be one among great yogis. No, he is among the pure devotees. There's a category of wrong and right. Prabhupada is in the right category. And that is, as Prabhupada said, I'm the only one who has come to the West and tried to spread the message of Krishna as it is. Our Bhagavad Gita is called as it is. Of course, subsequently, you have other Gaudiya Vaishnava sannyasis and other Vaishnavas also perhaps who are going to the West. That's fine. But Prabhupada is the one who broke open that pathway. I mean, who created that pathway, I would say, for others to go. So still the Prabhupada deserves that credit, that exclusive, unprecedented credit of bringing Krishna consciousness to the West. Okay, and just before we move on with reading, this point about how, before this section started, we just read about how Prabhupada was stunned in ecstasy when he heard the Govindam prayers. I'm sure that many of us here in this class may have had the same experience when we first heard the Govindam prayers in the temple. For me, especially when I first heard it, I was thinking, what in the world is this? It really looked, I mean, not what in the world. This cannot be part of this world. That kind of an experience it was when I first heard the Govindam prayers. And so here it was that the first disciples of Srila Prabhupada in London, Yamuna Mataji, especially who sang this song, they were all very young people, but they had so much devotion, so much dedication to Srila Prabhupada that when she sang this Govindam prayers, it is surcharged with spiritual ecstasy. And Prabhupada himself was moved by that singing. And it's something which everybody must have had this experience of, that it is out of the world. It's out of the world. Okay. We'll actually, I mean, one sense I could open up for some comments now, but We have lots more to cover. So we'll take it at the end as usual. Or maybe if I think that we can do it in the middle, we'll do it a little later, if it's appropriate. So let's just go ahead further with the reading.
Shall I continue, Prabhu?
Yes, Gautam.
To make matters worse, when Prabhupada first opened the new Bhagavatam chapter, the binding cracked and the pages fell out. Prabhupada glowered. The devotees in Boston, hearing of Prabhupada's anger, knew at once that their mistake in misprinting Srila Prabhupada's name was a serious oversight. Minimizing the spiritual master's position was a grave offense, and they had even published the offense. The serious implications were difficult for the devotees to face, and they knew they would have to rectify their mentality before they could make spiritual progress. Prabhupada criticized the mentality behind these mistakes, and his criticisms were instructive to his disciples. Unless he instructed them about the absolute position of the spiritual master, how would they learn? At the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam class, one morning, Prabhupada called on one of the women devotees, Nandarani. She stood respectfully. Do you chant 16 rounds every day? Well, I try to, Prabhupada. This is the problem, Prabhupada said. Turning to the temple president, if Nandarani, one of the senior responsible women, wasn't chanting regularly, then certainly the new women under her weren't either. This was the manager's fault. Prabhupada had praised and encouraged his disciples for laboring hard to renovate the temple and for going out daily into the streets to chant and distribute magazines. But for a devotee not to chant the prescribed rounds was to neglect the most important instruction. What Nandarani hadn't said was that the temple authorities had told her that chanting all her 16 rounds wasn't necessary as long as she worked. They had told her this, even though Prabhupada clearly instructed his disciples at the initiation to always chant at least 16 rounds daily. Then another incident. During the morning class, Prabhupada was discussing Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, an associate of Lord Chaitanya. Looking among the devotees, he asked, who can tell me who is Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya? No one spoke. Prabhupada waited. No, none of you can tell me who is Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya? He asked. One girl raised her hand. She said, read something about him. That was all. Aren't you ashamed? Prabhupada looked at the men. You should be the leaders. If the men cannot advance, then the women cannot advance. You must be Brahmanas. Then your wives will be Brahmanas. But if you are not Brahmanas, then what can they do? Without improving their chanting and without reading Krishna conscious literature, Prabhupada said, they would never attain the purity necessary for preaching Lord Chaitanya's message. While the local anomalies were weighing heavily on Srila Prabhupada, he learned of strange things his disciples in India had written in their letters, and he became more disturbed. One letter to the devotees in America reported that Prabhupada's godbrothers in India objected to his title Prabhupada. According to them, only Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati should be called Prabhupada, and they referred to Prabhupada as Swami Maharaja. Prabhupada also learned that some of his disciples were saying he was not the only spiritual master. They were interested in reading Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's books, as if to discover some new teaching Prabhupada had not yet revealed. Prabhupada regarded these remarks as dangerous for ISKCON. Advancement in spiritual life was based on implicit faith in the spiritual master, and to Prabhupada, these new ideas indicated a relative conception as opposed to the absolute conception of the spiritual master. Such a conception could destroy all he had established. At least it could destroy the spiritual life of anyone who held it. Though sometimes ignorant, His disciples, he knew, were not malicious. Yet, these letters from India carried a spiritual disease transmitted by several of Prabhupada's godbrothers to his disciples there. Prabhupada had already been troubled when some of his godbrothers had refused to help him secure land in Mayapur, the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. Although he had asked them to help his inexperienced disciples purchase land, they had not complied. In fact, some of them had worked against him. Prabhupada had written to one of his godbrothers. I am so sorry to learn that there is a of sort of conspiracy by some of our godbrothers as not to give me a place at Mayapur. Prabhupada was sensitive to any threat to ISKCON. His accepting the name Prabhupada, his teaching that the disciple must approach the spiritual master as the direct representative of Krishna without attempting to jump over him to the previous spiritual masters. These things he had carefully explained to his disciples. But now, a few irresponsibly spoken remarks in India were weakening the faith of some of his disciples. Perhaps this insidious contamination that was now spreading had precipitated the blunders at ISKCON Press and even the discrepancies in Los Angeles. Talks about the relative position of the spiritual master could only be the workings of Maya, the Lord's illusory energy. Maya was attempting to bewilder the devotees of ISKCON. That was her job, to lead the conditioned souls away from Krishna's service. The recent events began to hamper Prabhupada's writing. He had been working quickly in Los Angeles and had recently finished the second and final volume of Krishna. And on the very tape on which he had dictated the last chapter of Krishna, he had immediately begun a summary of the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Gradually, however, his writing stopped. Karandara. Prabhupada's translating would require a great deal of concentration. He would have two or three of his big Bhagavatam volumes opened up and sometimes a number of other small books, which he would refer to for something or other. He would sit wearing his glasses and speaking into his dictating machine, and he would be completely absorbed in reading. Sometimes he would make a brief note, then look into one of his books, then open another book, turn back to another page, make a note, and then dictate. It required a great deal of concentration. I think that's why Prabhupada did most of it at night, after he would rise from his late evening nap. From 1 or 2 in the morning until 6 or 7 in the morning, he would be absorbed. It was quiet at that time, and he could become absorbed. But when Prabhupada became disturbed about the problems in ISKCON, it inhibited his work. He was spending his time discussing with visiting devotees or myself or whoever was there. Then he would spend more time thinking matters over or pondering the problem, and he wouldn't be able to concentrate on his translating. These difficulties disturbed him, and he would think about them and say, I have not been able to concentrate. I have been thinking about this problem.
Okay,
Although,
hey, Madhu, just hold on, just hold on, just hold on. Okay, so one important thing that I wanted to mention here was that when Prabhupada actually established the Krishna consciousness movement, so he, especially in Mayapur, when he was trying to get land, they were not, his godbrothers were not cooperative, even to the extent of helping his inexperienced disciples to purchase land in Mayapur. And there is one incident where Jayapataka Maharaj mentions that once one of his godbrothers, I forget who it was, came to meet Prabhupada, a couple I think, they came to meet Prabhupada, and they were in Prabhupada's room at the Lotus building. And in fact, apparently, Jayapataka Maharaj is saying it was a very intense conversation. They could hear them loudly speaking almost fighting with each other, Prabhupada and his God brothers. Finally, they all left, and I mean, Prabhupada anyway knew how to conduct a conversation. He would always begin and end respectfully. So somehow, after the end of it, when they left, Prabhupada turned to Jayapatak Maharaj and said that these God brothers of mine, he said that if they know that, he was not referring to all the God brothers, but I mean, in general, those who were what do you call it? Not favorable towards, because Prabhupada did have the God brothers who were very favorable. Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji, Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj. There are others, there were several God brothers who were also appreciative. So when Prabhupada made these remarks, it was not in general to everybody, but uh, he was very disturbed that the people whom he approached to for help did not. So he said at that point that some of these God brothers of mine, they think that their thinking is, if they pass some air and if that would benefit me, they would restrain me even from passing air. To that extent, they were not willing to help Prabhupada. So that was quite that was the stark reality of those times when Prabhupada is trying to establish uh, a center at Mayapur. And here in this particular section, we hear how Prabhupada always stressed about the importance of chanting 16 rounds. So Nandarani at that time was a senior disciple of Prabhupada, relatively senior compared to the others. So if she did not follow, how would the others follow? So Prabhupada was very strict about this principle that if the leaders don't follow, we cannot expect the followers to follow. Leaders have to follow first. So that's why if you notice the most important job description for a governing body commission member is that he should ensure that devotees in his zone are attending the full morning program. They're enthusiastic, they're chanting 16 rounds and doing book distribution, other works with the Sankirtan movement. So this is their most important job description, which means obviously they themselves should be doing it. Otherwise, how would they be able to inspire others to do it? So Prabhupada is very insistent on this, that no matter what work we have in Krishna consciousness, we cannot compromise the chanting of 16 rounds and the program that Prabhupada himself has given. I remember once Jayapatak Maharaj said in a class that he went to Prabhupada and asked him that because he had to work there were 2 shifts or 3 shifts, I think, of workers who were working in Mayapur during the construction of the long building and other buildings. I mean, at that time, at least, long building. So Jayapatak Maharaj had to be up until almost, I mean, I think 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock at night, something like that. So then Prabhupada told him that if you're not able to attend Mangalarti because of, he said that he could not, he could skip Mangalarti if needed because of the kind of schedule that he had. But he said, you cannot skip Guru Puja. So Prabhupada is insistent on certain things, especially 16 rounds. He never made an exception to anyone at any time, in any place, in any circumstance. He said devotees should chant 16 rounds. Of course, if somebody's in a coma, that's a different thing. But I'm just saying, otherwise, or if they're very badly sick like that, on some ventilator, or very, very difficult, or that's it. Except in those exceptional circumstances, if you can breathe or talk, Prabhupada expected them to chant 16 rounds. We should not also forget that principle that, yes, the famous thing the Prabhupada said, preach now, samadhi later. Prabhupada did say that. But when he says preach now, chant now, preach now, samadhi later. That's what it means. Not the preach now is inclusive of the instruction to chant 16 rounds a day. The relativization of Prabhupada. So I spoke a little earlier about the relativization of Prabhupada with respect to the other people outside of Krishna consciousness. Now, within Krishna consciousness also, there's something called relativization of Prabhupada. We don't have the authority to look at Prabhupada's teachings we cannot study Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's teachings and see how Prabhupada has followed Bhaktisiddhanta or not. It's the other way around. We have to first of all examine Prabhupada's teachings. Then when we examine Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's teachings or previous acharyas, we can understand, actually Prabhupada followed him like this, like this, like this. First of all, we have to look at the previous acharyas through Prabhupada's teachings, not look at Prabhupada through the teachings of the previous acharyas. there is a difference. There is a difference. That's why I'm saying, like, because between the acharyas, sometimes there could be some things which are different in a mood or balance or emphasis uh, or even philosophically, there could be something which is apparently different. So to resolve all these things, first of all, we need to take it up in the mood, balance, emphasis of Srila Prabhupada and the philosophical perspective that Prabhupada has given us. Then try to see how this is correct from the previous Acharya's teachings. Not that we accept some conclusion. So the conclusion that we should come to is Prabhupada's conclusion. And we should try to establish that conclusion from the previous Acharya's teachings also. Not that we establish a conclusion based on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Then we examine Prabhupada's teaching. And the conclusion is now coming from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, right? What we have understood as a conclusion. And then we try to somehow or the other see if Prabhupada is following the same thing. If he's not following, say, oh, Prabhupada did not follow Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur there. What does it mean? So we have to be careful that all our teaching, all the understanding of Krishna consciousness should come from Prabhupada. This is the full and final understanding of Krishna consciousness that we should get. Then we can see how there could be so many, what do you call it? When we read the acharyas, our Krishna consciousness further expands, but all that expansion is happening within the realm of understanding that we have of the teachings from Prabhupada. Because Krishna consciousness is unlimited. Within the understanding that we have, things can expand and expand and expand and expand. It's not that a new understanding is suddenly coming into the picture. The same understanding is expanding in various nuances and whatever, So that is the spirit of follower of Prabhupada. And we need to notice one thing, which, as Karandar Prabhu is mentioning here, Prabhupada is a Sthita Prajna, one who cannot be disturbed. That's the whole meaning of a Sthita Prajna, right? He's always fixed in Krishna consciousness. Yet we see that here Karandar Prabhu relates that Prabhupada was so disturbed that he would say, I've not been able to concentrate. I've been thinking about this problem. So when he gets disturbed, it's not like our disturbance, where our Krishna consciousness gets shaken. Here it's not his Krishna consciousness getting shaken, rather his priorities getting displaced. So from here we can understand what should also be our most important priority. Like if Prabhupada's most important priority was that his position, the position of the spiritual master, he was the position of the founder Acharya. So if that should not be compromised or relativized at any cost. So that was such an important matter that he was trying to focus on solving that first before continuing with his translation. That is the point that is being brought out here very nicely. That was his number one priority before going on to continue with his translation. He was so disturbed that he wanted to fix that problem somehow or the other. This should be the same understanding that we have to have in our Krishna consciousness also. Nothing is more important a priority. When Prabhupada's position is minimized, we should try to ensure that that does not happen. We cannot go on with life as normal when Prabhupada is also being minimized. No, we should ensure that at least in the areas that we are working with, Prabhupada's position as an absolute authority in Krishna consciousness should remain without it being minimized. And we cannot just afford to just go on with life when his position is minimized. Okay, I think at this point I'll stop here. If there are any thoughts, reflection, because this section is very dense with a lot of very, very important anecdotes. So any thoughts, reflections, comments, questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Marji.
Yeah, now we heard here that the previous section we were just discussing about being very much concentrated or about Prabhupada's, like somebody has put the Prabhupada's photo upside down and put the salt in the Charanamrita, all those things. Generally, we do also like, I'm saying we are doing the cooking for Bhoga and all for the Lordship. Sometimes like inadvertently, sometimes there will be little what to say imbalance in the cooking, maybe taste wise, or maybe it will be little bit extra salt, or maybe little bit of extra chili powder, or means chili or something like that, may not be up to the mark and all. So why sometimes it happens. Generally, okay, prasadam becomes always really tasteful later, but still there will be some discrepancies in that one.
Yeah.
So how can we take it? Means how to rectify, or how to like is it permissible, or
Yeah.
like?
Okay. See, in logic also, because I've studied logic. Maybe you've not studied logic. So we have to understand there are two different things. One is called a contradiction. You cannot contradict an instruction that Prabhupada is given, right? So, for example, Charanamritam is supposed to be made of certain ingredients. You cannot contradict that ingredient. To put salt is a contradiction in Charanamritam. You cannot contradict the instruction that Prabhupada has given us. And here, what you're talking about is a prescribed ingredient going in excess or deficient, right?
Yes,
So,
yes,
one is prohibited, one is prescribed.
yes,
Within the realms of the prescribed, because we are not perfect beings, right? So you can only try your best, and when things go wrong, you have to be conscious of it, try to fix it. That's what it is. But it is not like this category. You're not doing something which is prohibited.
Okay, okay.
So we should be conscious that we should not do anything which is prohibited.
Yeah, okay. So, okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dhanush Pranam. Prabhuji, just on the disciplic succession, when we are saying that you have to look Prabhupada, what Prabhupada has given a message, not through the acharyas, right? Like that you also mentioned, like there could be some discrepancy. Is that like there could be some discrepancy in philosophical?
Different. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. Correct. Go ahead. Apparently different teachings.
Yeah. But they're all comes under same philosophy that they believe and what we are practicing, right, Prabhuji? But there will be, the end result, like philosophically, everybody is our Guru Parampara. Every of our acharyas are teaching the same thing, isn't it? Is it that like there's?
But are we understanding the same thing? We may not be understanding the same thing, right? You want me to give an example?
Yes, Prabhuji.
The most famous example in ISKCON's own history, and which is continuing to today, and which is expanding today also, the controversy, is about where did we come from? So Prabhupada maintained consistently that we had a fully developed relationship with Krishna in the spiritual world before we fell down. Okay. Now, this is something which Prabhupada consistently explained. Then, during the Prabhupada's own time, there was a controversy which arose about it, because there are places in his books where he says, no one falls down from Vaikuntha. He says these things also. Then during Prabhupada's own time, this controversy came up, and Prabhupada wrote a letter to address that controversy. Nevertheless, today, devotees, several devotees, including senior devotees, they take the position that you can't take Prabhupada's letter as absolute. Generally, yes, because Prabhupada wrote a letter, which letters are not taken as absolute. There's always, it depends on the circumstances. It depends on the circumstances of the person who has written the letter. But however, we should remember that our system is that when you have a doubt about the teachings, when you're not clear about the teachings, you ask Prabhupada, right? And if Prabhupada gives the clarification to that controversy, it is natural. This is actually a no-brainer that clarification should be taken as the final word. You cannot again go back and say, oh, it is a letter. This is a false argument, completely false. So Prabhupada addressed this controversy even during his time. He said, formerly we were with Krishna in his Leela or sport. It begins the letter like that. Formerly we were with Krishna in his Leela or sport. Now, then what happened was that subsequently, what's the people? During not only the Prabhupada had settled it. At least for me, I think he has settled it. But nevertheless, this has continued even today. It has become very big now, because there is this whole discussion about somebody has released a book. One of the sannyasis outside of ISKCON has released a book called Inherent or Inherited. So according to him, bhakti is also not inherent. Bhakti is also inherited, which is again different from Prabhupada's teaching. Now, where are they coming up with all these things? They're reading Jiva Goswami and other people, other acharyas, not Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. They are pretty clear that we fell from the spiritual world. Now, but Jiva Goswami apparently doesn't have the same opinion. At least that is what these people claim, that Jiva Goswami does not have the same opinion. And so therefore, when Prabhupada did it, or Bhaktivinoda Thakur did it, they did it as a preaching strategy. This is not the philosophical truth. The philosophical truth we can understand by reading the teachings of the Goswamis, especially the 6 Shat Sandarbhas. So what essentially is happening here is that we are replacing Prabhupada with them as the authority. So now, what does it mean? Prabhupada has given us certain understanding of the previous Acharya's teachings. Now we're going to give up that understanding for the teaching of lesser mortals. What does it mean? Of course they're devotees, but so they are trying to say the Acharyas are saying this. Prabhupada is trying to say the Acharyas are saying this. So which should we accept? But in the complexity of the arguments, this point is missed. That actually we are not. There's no such thing as understanding the previous Acharyas directly, because nobody is a pure devotee. And Prabhupada was a pure devotee. And of course, we are all practicing pure devotional service, but Prabhupada was a transcendental resident of the spiritual world, and he can understand Jiva Goswami. If what he has presented is it a preaching strategy? Where is it? It's a speculation. Where did Prabhupada say this is a preaching strategy? The argument that is given is Western people will find this very difficult to understand. Therefore, Prabhupada did a preaching strategy. But where does he say it? Where does he say it? So these are all very speculative kind of things, And then even among those who accept that we fell from the spiritual world, there is also another further difference. That's why it gets very complicated. There is something called what kind of bhakti do we have inherent? So according to them, the bhakti is not inherent in a fully developed state. It's called a teleological inherence. Anyway, I won't get into the technicalities of that. But so even among that, there's a difference. So what are we supposed to accept? We are supposed to accept what Prabhupada said. End of story. That's how it is. So I think this example gives an idea. So if you look at Prabhupada's teachings, this is what he's saying. In fact, if there are some conversations where Prabhupada is being asked, Krishna says, Yat gatvana nivaratante tadhama paramam mama. One who goes into my spiritual abode never falls again. He says that, right? So when Prabhupada is specifically asked this question, you can see those conversations. Prabhupada is saying, he's being asked, so does it mean that one who goes will never fall down? Prabhupada says, no, you always have your free will. You can still fall down. This is Prabhupada's reading of that verse. So sometimes the verses are there for emphasis. Emphasis, of course, it is very difficult for someone who's gone back to again fall down after going through whatever they've gone through in this material world. But nevertheless, the possibility is still open. This is Prabhupada's teaching. There's no doubt about it, because that's the only, even others also don't contradict what Prabhupada is saying. Is the people who differ. They all say Prabhupada is saying this. But why Prabhupada is saying it? One group of people think he's saying it as a preaching strategy. Or maybe they have other explanations also. I don't know what the other explanations are so far. But the direct understanding is this is what Prabhupada taught us. Let's accept it. And we could say that, okay, we don't understand why he said it, whatever. That much people, that to that extent is humility. Okay, if I don't understand, that does not mean it's not right. If somebody reads Jiva Goswami and say, I'm not able to understand how Prabhupada is following Jiva Goswami, fine. Let them say, I don't understand how Prabhupada is following Jiva Goswami. But the question is whether there's a difference between whether something is right and how something is right. Prabhupada said, if you ask the question whether something is right, it is called a mental speculation. If you ask a question how something is right, it is called a philosophical speculation. Whether something is right means, Prabhupada gave the example, when Krishna says, I am the taste of water, we cannot ask whether is Krishna the taste of water? That's wrong. Krishna is the taste of water. How is the taste of water, we can ask. That's called philosophical speculation. So when it comes to Prabhupada's teachings, we cannot ask whether Prabhupada is right or wrong. Prabhupada is right. You can ask how he is right. from based on the previous, whatever, when you read the previous acharyas, how Prabhupada is right, you may not understand it, but we have to accept that he's right. That's the meaning of being a follower of Prabhupada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice explanation, Prabhuji. Thanks for that. And I mean, like the end understanding is like just to follow what Prabhupada says. When we have that maturity, that level of understanding what our previous acharya says, then we can go ahead and read previous. Otherwise, just stick on to what Prabhupada says.
Yeah.
Right,
So,
Prabhuji?
yeah, yes, correct. Because the problem is that we have ISKCON and the wider world has been filled with literatures of the previous acharyas now. You know, so it is very easy for people to just access all these different things and start reading and all that. But we should stick to the program that Prabhupada gave us, which is first of all understand his teachings properly, and so that Prabhupada did not prohibit us from reading the previous acharyas, though. In fact, he recommends it also, no, because it is part of the bhakti rasa, no? It expands the bhakti rasa, but if you don't have the proper understanding, then it can create some.
Yes. Yes, understand. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, this is regarding next that some like Prabhupada's god brothers were troubling him and to take the land in Mayapur and all. Now it has become that generally in every city or any place, there are so many centers. In one city, there will be sometimes 2, 3 centers, 4 centers, or there will be small groups and all.
Yeah.
Among them, they have some like what has happens is that if you go from one center to another center, if you go as a devotee and you take darshan of the deities over there, whatever, the people from that temple, they know that you are generally doing seva in another temple.
Correct.
And they have this kind of mentality that I have seen also and I've experienced also. They think themselves superior, or there will be some kind of defensive mood. They don't take whoever has come as a devotee with the open mind or open this one. There will be very defensive. I don't know what is the reason. They think that I think some clash, some Cold War sort of things I have observed, Prabhuji. So can you say anything about that, Prabhuji?
You're talking about devotees or centers, or I mean, followers of Prabhupada who are no longer his followers and other groups.
No, Prabhuji. No, different centers of ISKCON only, Prabhuji. Different centers of ISKCON itself. So they generally there is between the centers also there will be like Cold War type. This one we have experienced it. I have experienced it.
This is, I mean, if you want to ask me, this is Kanishta mentality. What can be done?
But it is there, Prabhuji. That's what I'm saying. Because I'm seeing that because if in one center, okay, they are doing that one for like some kind of not like okay, we are from ISKCON. All of us are one in this one. No, it is not there, Prabhuji.
See, if there is, why I'm saying it's Kanishta mentalities, because if you have spiritual nourishment, if you have spiritual nourishment, you will know the value of that nourishment. And if you know the value of spiritual nourishment, you will appreciate what is it? All people connected to Srila Prabhupada. Doesn't matter whether they are your center, not your center, or what is all this. It's a question of, so they don't understand the proper value of spiritual nourishment. That's why I said that it's all Kanishta mentality. And you see that, I mean, these are the people, not these, generally those who have this kind of mentality, they undergo various kinds of difficulties to maintain the temple. This, that, all these things will just keep going on and on and on and on. And the people who will keep pushing forward are the ones who've broken this kind of mentality and who have people who are broad-minded, as they say. Prabhupada uses the expression. So they are the ones who progress and who set proper examples. I'm not saying others don't progress, but when I say progress, whenever I use expressions like this, it means progress in the way Prabhupada wanted us to progress.
Yes. Because
I mean, very slowly will progress.
Yes. Because this happens in the managerial level itself, Prabhupada. It is not that lower like devotees or somebody. It happens in the managerial level itself. So really it is disturbing, Prabhupada.
Yeah, so that's why I'm trying to say that I've been saying this before also. Advancement is not dependent on a managerial position. We just tend to equate our managerial position with advancement.
Mhm.
Advancement is not at all dependent on managerial. Advancement and managerial positions are not synonymous. Just like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's own Gaudiya Mutt, the manager, he had an expert manager there, and he would steal money, you know. And when the disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur brought it up to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he simply said, if I were to get someone from the outside world to manage my mutt, I would have to pay him so much more money. Anyway, so I'm spending a little bit on him and he's managing. So Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur did not consider that a manager is necessarily somebody who has to be very spiritually advanced. Managing is not, of course, we could always say that if they don't manage properly, people may get discouraged. All these things are there. I'm not saying no. But what I'm trying to say is that you need to separate managerial position and advancement. They're two separate things.
But Prabhuji, it carries down, Prabhuji. Like I have observed that it carries down when the manager comes. Remaining people also will observe that same kind of differences or those things they will keep. So they generally, like what happens from one temple, they don't visit another temple unless it is really this one. They won't mingle also with those people, or they don't visit the temple, or they don't communicate at all. So, for example, if Guru Maharaj comes to our city or something, we won't know like exactly what are the programs there, what is happening in another center. If Maharaj is visiting one temple, we won't know at all what is the program in that temple is happening, so that we can go from here to that temple and visit there. Maybe Maharaj is not visiting this temple here, like that. I mean to say. So those communication also won't be there for like that.
Mataji, what's it? See, one thing I feel is that it's very important that we should, I'm talking for us, sir. I'm not talking for newcomers. I'm just talking for us. Is that we should, why have we taken to Krishna Consciousness? That should be something very clear to us, Why have we taken it? Have we taken up to attain love of Godhead? Or have we taken up to have everything in place? Which means that we need to have a good temple authority who should treat us very nicely. All this is nice, but none of this is required for us to advance in Krishna consciousness. This is our philosophy. I'm not saying, again, I should be very careful. I'm not saying that these things should not be there. Prabhupada wanted them to be there. The Prabhupada is insistent that they should be there properly. No, but even if it is not there, our advancement is not dependent on that. For example, for the kind of experience that I had when I joined ISKCON, it's quite extremely, what do you call it? Okay, let me give you a simple example. Okay, during the time that I joined Krishna consciousness, if you don't join the temple, you are in Maya. Okay, and look at the extreme situation. I'll give you an example. The youth preaching leader of that time, he would say to us students, I was in grade 11 at that time, 17 years old. He would tell us that if you say that you want Krishna consciousness, you also want to pursue your academics, it is like a man telling his wife, I love you, but I also love the neighbor's wife. You see the association. You see the connection that they're drawing it to. That means to pursue academics is as illicit as a man telling his wife, I also love the neighbor's wife. So you can imagine the kind of impact that this could have on new people joining the Krishna consciousness movement.
Yes, imagine. That is what my point is, Prabhu.
Yeah, but so when that happened, and listen, I'm not saying one-time incident. That was a constant mood. You go to the temple. Every time that you go to the temple, you come away with a mixed feeling. Mixed feeling is, the good feeling is, okay, I attended temple, I attended Bhagavatam class, I attended all these things. The other thing is, devotees would talk to you when you go to the temple. And what would they say? You are in Maya. You are in Maya. When are you giving up? When are you shaving up? When are you giving up? When are you shaving up? So this was a constant, and especially when you are vulnerable like that, in the sense that you're taking up Krishna consciousness and all that. So what I did was, I want to understand Krishna consciousness properly, as Prabhupada gave it to us, So I took a conscious decision. I don't know if the decision was right or wrong, but at least I took a conscious decision at that point. I'm not going to go to the temple unless I sought out clearly what is Prabhupada's philosophy. Then I sat and read the entire Leelamrita, 7 volumes, big page to page. I read this. What do you call it? From the December of 1990 to February of 1991. In those 3 months, I finished the entire Leelamrita, and then it was very clear to me what they are doing is not what Prabhupada is representing. Then the next question comes up: what do I do next? Okay, so does it mean that I stop going to the temple? No, because Prabhupada says devotee association is very important. You have to do the process is the Harinam Sankirtan. So all that. So I went ahead and did it. And although it was austere because of whatever they're doing, but because I had the right understanding of Krishna consciousness, the right philosophy which Prabhupada has given, he could handle it. I could handle it. So this is the point that I'm trying to make, that things may be wrong, but if people do the right things, nothing can stop them. Nothing can stop them. So we should focus on what we need to do rather than try to fix the things which are not right, because you cannot fix it. What can you do? You can't fix it. And eventually, that whole system got into a big mess. Whatever system that is going to, at that time, it was recognized as among the world's best and whatever. But I could see this is a complete mess up. Of course, they had very good things. They would emphasize properly on the morning program. They had a lot of things going right, but a lot of things are completely messed up. But eventually, that whole system did not sustain. The whole thing kind of collapsed. So, the system, I'm saying. So, but in the process, I've been through all kinds of phases of it, before it collapsed, after it collapsed, and all that. So, it didn't bother me so much because of the fact that Prabhupada's teachings are very clear. And if we stick with it, if we genuinely desire to follow his teachings, we can navigate any circumstance. No circumstance is impossible to navigate.
Yes, Prabhuji. But when you are,
of course, I do agree with you that people can get turned off. So many things can go wrong, but we should try to prevent it. But ultimately, we don't have any control on that, right? What can you do about it? You can only try to do within what Prabhupada is prescribed. Okay, raise it to a superior authority, whatever. But still, the superior authority is also not taking some action. Then again, that gets another problem. So you can't really do much about it, right? But what you can do is you can practice Krishna consciousness, and you can practice Krishna consciousness, preach Krishna consciousness in the right manner. And even among the people whom you preach to, some people may get disturbed by this and leave Krishna consciousness. What can you do again? But some people will stick.
That is what, when the new people come only, for them it is a little bit difficult to understand these things. When you're there for a long time, if you read regularly, then you can take all those things in the right spirit, or you can come out of it. But when you're new, if you see these things, it will be really, really disturbing.
No, that's where I'm disagreeing with you, because see, when I saw things, it was like every time you go into the temple and come out, you feel a mixture of ecstasy and great mental anguish, So, it's not that, but I was very determined that somehow or the other, I need to find out what is the right thing. So I just made a decision to study. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not that ultimately anyone can use it as a, see, there are two separate things, Mataji. One is that Prabhupada did not want something, so we should be careful of it. So if someone leaves Krishna consciousness, we should accept responsibility for them leaving Krishna consciousness. Of course, I'm talking only about adults here. I'm not talking about minors and all. Let's not get into that. That's a whole different thing. But right now, I'm just talking about only adults. So if some adult goes away from Krishna consciousness, yes, the temple may have messed up their life, but adults also have have the internally, nobody can steal your free will. No, you also have the free will. If you want to study Prabhupada's books, then you can still do it. So it's not dependent on how a temple authority treats a newcomer. At the same time, it is important because Prabhupada instructed. I'm not saying no. So please don't, please understand me correctly. All that I'm saying is, if someone is an adult and they have always the means to study Prabhupada's books, and follow how Krishna consciousness is meant to be followed. That's it. That responsibility one cannot avoid. One cannot just say, okay, I was mistreated in this temple badly, I was mistreated in that temple badly, therefore I'm not practicing. How is it depend on mistreatment or not?
Yeah, that cannot happen. True.
Yeah, for adults yes. Only. Yes. I don't get children is totally different. Therefore, children we are 100% responsible. Forget about what's it.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Any further thoughts? Otherwise, we can continue. Okay, Maji, you can go ahead.
Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah.
So,
No problem. Yeah.
no, mine's going to be a little involved. That's why I wanted to wait. I mean, if you wanted to carry on reading, we can do that another time. It will.
It's better to take them as they come. Yeah. Sure.
Are you sure?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to play devil's advocate. Okay, please.
Yeah.
My love for Prabhupada, I hope you know.
Yes, I know.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate here because this is a frequently debated area that I come across, and I wanted to kind of hear somebody who loves Prabhupada far more than I've ever seen give me your version of the answer. So firstly, I'm going to ask you a question. Is Brahmaji a pure devotee?
Yes.
So Brahmaji is a pure devotee, that you accept that Brahmaji can make mistakes.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay. What mistake are you referring to?
He's made apparent mistakes in misunderstanding Krishna, apparent mistakes in chasing his daughter. Apparent. These are, of course.
Okay. Fine. Let's start with chasing his daughter. That happened. He gave up that body as a result of that.
Right. But my question was, we accept that a pure devotee can make apparent mistakes.
He was not a pure devotee at that time. It's not that Brahma was a born pure devotee. No. I mean, the position of Brahma is not necessarily given to a pure devotee. Our Brahma happens to be a pure devotee because of the fact that, okay, he's purified and he's a pure devotee. Not that every Brahma is a pure devotee. When he ran after his daughter, he was not a pure devotee. Pure devotees don't run after their daughter, for sure. He gave up that body.
Pure devotee is pure regardless, no? I mean, you are, if you're an eternal associate, you're an eternal associate. You don't become an eternal associate at some point in your life.
Brahma is not an eternal associate. It doesn't say anywhere that Brahma is an eternal associate of the Lord. No.
Okay, so
Brahma is not an eternal associate of the Lord. Yeah.
So is that where the difference is? We consider Prabhupada to be an eternal associate, not a pure devotee.
Yeah. No, see, okay, let me put it like that. All eternal associates of the Lord are pure devotees, but all pure devotees are not necessarily eternal associates of the Lord. They may have been purified by the process of sadhana. Narada Muni.
Prabhuji, can I make a comment on this? But based on my understanding, right, Prabhuji? So because when you take about the Brahmaji's example, right, I'm in that understanding because they perform all these kind of things to teach us a lesson. It's not that like they do mistakes because they wantedly do the mistakes because they are teaching a lesson for us. But if you do this if you do this mistake, this is what it will happen. This is what you have to do. Is that kind of an understanding correct, Prabhuji?
No. It's because the position of Brahma is occupied by the most pious living entity. It's not necessarily occupied by a devotee. That person can become a devotee. That's a different thing. Of course, he's far more pious than what ordinary people are. I mean, you cannot imagine his piety. But he's not a pure devotee. And sometimes there are not even such pious souls that Krishna himself takes up the position of Brahma. Because Brahma is a post, actually. And pure devotees don't take a post in the material world. They're not interested in taking up any post in the material world. They're not interested. So it's a very idea that a pure devotee is occupying a Brahma's post itself is, itself is contradictory because pure devotees don't aspire for any post in this material world. It's the most pious person who gets the position of Brahma. So, but as Prabhupada writes everywhere, that anyone can become a devotee, pure devotee. So our Brahma is a pure devotee. He's not an eternal associate of the Lord. That doesn't say anywhere. Now, that's another thing, that we should also be careful about where is Prabhupada saying. For example, Prahlad Maharaj, we know Prabhupada says the eternal associate of the Lord. Pandavas, Prabhupada says the Acharyas say. But it's not said that Brahma is an eternal associate of the Lord. It's not said there. Anyway.
Okay, my line of question is, I think you guessed where I'm going with it already. So can we accept that Prabhupada can or could make mistakes or not?
He cannot, because he's an eternal associate of the Lord. They don't make mistakes. Only a sadhaka, let me put it like this. Only a sadhaka who has not attained or even forget sadhaka, even not just sadhana bhakti, even from bhava bhakti you can make mistakes. Only a prema bhakta cannot make any mistakes. The possibility, as one progresses, the chances become lesser and lesser and lesser and lesser. The least chance of making a mistake is in bhava bhakti, and then zero chances of making mistake is in prema bhakti. So one who has attained prema bhakti cannot make a mistake. Then the question comes.
My leading question here was that, is there a point, do you think, in the future, a generation or two further down the road, where there is going to be a misrepresentation of who Srila Prabhupada was? Because we've seen it in other sampradayas and other movements and Swami Narayans and others, where the Acharya, who was a saint, has ended up becoming an incarnation because the followers have changed their mentality and their stance towards who he was. Are we in danger of evolving that position for Srila Prabhupada, where we put him into a platform that he was not, that we call him some sort of incarnation at some point, because we become so blinded by who he was. Sorry, we're blinded by our perception of who he was, as opposed to who he actually was.
Okay, this is a good question. I think right now we are facing the opposites. I mean, we are generally facing a situation where Prabhupada is being accepted as an authority on all spiritual subject matters, but on material subject matters, he made mistakes. This is generally what you hear in ISKCON these days. But so then those who oppose this conception are considered to be those who are defying Prabhupada. Defying means making him like a deity. So anybody who opposes the conception that Prabhupada is, what do you call it? The wrong conception. Anyway, I'm calling it wrong. I can even defend it. Anyway, so the wrong conception is Prabhupada is a spiritually perfect being who made mistakes in material matters. Now that's a very, very complex thing. Not complex. It's a very, in principle, there's a lot of problem with this. I'll give you an example. For example, this Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu that we talk about, who lies on the Garbha ocean. From his navel sprouts a stem, and on that, sprouts a lotus, and on the stem of that lotus is all the planetary systems. Brahma sitting on the lotus. Now, the stem is coming from the navel of Lord Vishnu, who is 100% spiritual. So, is the stem material or is it spiritual? So, if we start trying to pick apart what is spiritual, what is material, you'll get into these kind of complexities. Rather, for a pure devotee, his conception of Krishna's energy is not constrained in the way we look at it. For example, Prabhupada says in some lecture, what is it? There's nothing called material for a pure devotee. He sees everything as energy of Krishna, working in different ways. That conception we don't have, actually. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to say is that just like a sweater, Ravindra Swarup Prabhu gives in his hermeneutic seminars, example, suppose you have a sweater, and you just pull one thread from the sweater. You may think, oh, I'm only pulling one thread, but in the entire sweater is one unit. If you pull one thread from it, the whole sweater is going to unravel. So like that, the moment we make the statement that Prabhupada is spiritually perfect, materially imperfect, you're pulling one thread. And then people will come up with all kinds of things, which is already happening. Now, if you try to say something different, then they'll say you're a fanatic. You don't understand Prabhupada properly. You're trying to defy him. Okay, let me put it like this. Let's take the example which are used by these, those people who claim the Prabhupada is spiritually perfect, materially imperfect. Is Prabhupada said, women have 36 ounces of brain, men have 64 ounces. When Prabhupada is asked, where did he get this information? Is it from Vedas? He says, no. My psychology professor, Professor Urquhart, we know that. We already discussed that, right? Yeah. Urquhart, he was the one who gave that example. Now, Prabhupada, first of all, he's not trying to make a point that from here I have understood that women are less intelligent. It is exactly the different. It's a very different situation. He's trying to say the scriptures say women are less intelligent, and here you have a material authority who is also confirming the same thing. Now, what is presented to Prabhupada was not a fact, as has been established now. So Prabhupada did not know that it was a fact or not. This is something we have to accept. Otherwise, it's not that he knew it's not a fact, but still he presented it. No. Prabhupada did not know whether it was a fact or not a fact. But what Prabhupada did know was a Vedic conclusion. So whether he knew it was a fact or not fact does not matter, because he used it merely to promote the Vedic conclusion. That's all that he did. So yes, he did not know that it was true or not, and later it was shown that it was not true. But what was Prabhupada's activity? The activity was, he was trying to establish a Vedic conclusion. And for the Vedic conclusions are all self-illuminating. You don't need some evidence to prove it. Prabhupada would always say this. You can't take a lamp, you don't need a lamp to show the sun. But modern people, they don't accept the Vedic conclusion. Therefore, if something comes which is favorable, Prabhupada engaged it to establish the Vedic conclusion. Although he may have accepted although it may be later shown that he accepted a wrong evidence. So what? Prabhupada's conclusion is not dependent on the evidence. This evidence is meant for those who cannot understand the teaching. That's all. So there are several places where Prabhupada accepted incorrect facts, but his conclusions were never wrong. This is my point. Because he already knows the conclusions. So whenever he accepts an incorrect fact, something incorrect, which is not factual, he merely did it because it was accepted in the society at that time, and which helps him to present his Vedic conclusions. So to that extent, we can say, yes, Prabhupada accepted something which is wrong. But it's not what is happening there is not just the acceptance of something which is wrong. But the conclusion is what is most important there. Prabhupada already has conclusions, and he accepted something wrong to promote that conclusion, but which is accepted as right at that time, though. Is that okay, bro?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, as I said, it can become very involved debate. So I think
Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives a very clear thing. He said, my Guru Maharaj, I'll send you the reference also. He says, my Guru Maharaj is not an expert on worldly topics. It's an open position he took. That because of course Gaurkishore Babaji is illiterate. Forget about his engagement with the material world. He said, my spiritual master is not expert on the topics of this material world. But he says he is infallible when it comes to his judgment of material matters. Abhranta Mimamsaka. Abhranta means one who's not, who's not influenced by illusion or influenced by anything wrong. Abhranta. whose consciousness is completely clear. Mimamsaka of what? Of Mimamsaka means one who can clearly give a judgment on any given material topic. This is the position that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur took about Gaur Kishore Babaji. This is what we are also supposed to take. We don't necessarily say that Prabhupada did not accept any wrong statements from the material world. He accepted wrong statements also. But he did not give us any wrong conclusion. This is the point. Because he already had a conclusion. So whatever he accepted was just to push that conclusion. That's all. Which is currently fashionable or acceptable at that point in time.
Thank you, Prabhu. I have just a small comment on these ultimately these intellectual debates that go on. You know, to know and understand Krishna is not about intellectual gymnastics, is it? It's about implicit love and faith. And quite often in history, you see the deepest and highest love comes from those who don't have the academic understanding of Krishna. You can be an Oxford graduate. There are professors in Oxford who teach Hinduism who are not devotees. They may understand it philosophically. They may be able to teach the philosophy, but they can't really deeply understand it in their heart. So, you know, it's like an ant trying to understand quantum physics. You know, our ant-like brains are not really equipped to understand Krishna's magnanimity. So, you know, when these things are applied at such intrinsic levels, I think it just becomes a laughable debate sometimes. You know, I think we're not qualified to talk about this. I read something really funny. It's you'll have to forgive the language on this, but there was a man who sat next to a 6-year-old on a flight, and he thought I'd engage the 6-year-old in. He was an atheist, and he said, "My dear, it's said that the flight can be much more pleasant if we engage in conversation. So will you engage?" So he said, "Yes. Can I ask you a question?" He goes, what do you think about God and his existence? And he was an atheist. He was trying to make a point. And he went on. I'm going to shorten it. It's quite a long, it's quite enlightening though. So the girl says, "I would love to engage. But before we start, can I ask you a question, sir?" So he said, "Yes, please go ahead." So she said, "A cow, a sheep, a horse, each eat grass. But a cow produces fatty through a backside. A sheep produces pellets, and a horse produces whatever it was. I can't remember now. Can you answer that question?" So the man looked stunned at the 6-year-old's rather intellectual question. He said, "No, I think that's irrelevant, isn't it?" So she said, "Do you really feel qualified to talk about God when you don't know shit?" Forgive the language. I just thought it was so apt, you know, in many debates, you know, when we don't really understand, don't have the qualification, yet we want to debate in these things. So my apologies if I've done the same today.
No, you haven't done it. See, the point is that Prabhupada said, we have no fear. Like he would always say, right? Like I'm speaking all these things confidently. And he gave the example, just like a child. If the child is holding the father's finger, the child is not afraid. Just like he gave his own example. That was it his child or yeah, I think yeah. He was traveling with his child in a train, and the ticket conductor he was playing a prank on his son, saying that, "Oh, you have to get off the train because you don't have a ticket," you know. And he held on tightly to Prabhupada's hand and he said, "No, you cannot take me out of this because I'm holding my father's hand," you know. So like that, we can be confident and fearless, because in the sense that no matter what intellectual arguments, no matter what anybody can give, if we stick with Prabhupada's teachings, we stick with the understanding that Prabhupada is beyond the defects, is one of the conditions of the beyond the 4 defects of the conditioned soul, one of which is to make mistakes. So Prabhupada is not a conditioned soul, so he's beyond mistakes. If we stick with that conclusion, we can fearlessly stick with that conclusion. no matter who's saying what with their intellectual understanding of it. That's very important, that we need to be confident and sure about Prabhupada's position. Otherwise, we cannot make steady progress either. Is it okay?
Yes, Prabhu. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Like,
Prabhuji.
there is an ISKCON scholar who has written a paper called Understanding Prabhupada, so which is very, anyway, that's a long paper. So I'm trying to respond to that with a paper called Accepting Prabhupada, trying to refute that with Accepting Prabhupada. Let's see. It's a work in progress. Once it's finished, then I'll publish it. Okay, Mataji, you can continue. We still have another 15 minutes or so.
Okay. Although the spiritual master suffers for his disciples' mistakes, Prabhupada's perspective was not simply negative. He continued chanting and lecturing in the temple and inviting the leaders of his movement to visit him in the ideal center of Los Angeles. But he also corrected the diseased mentality wherever it appeared. When, for example, Gurudasa wrote from London to say that they had allowed an Indian guest to lecture in the temple while sitting on Prabhupada's Vyasasana, Prabhupada immediately wrote back correcting him. I am surprised how you allowed Mr. Parikh to sit on the Vyasasana. You know that Vyasasana is meant for the representative of Vyasadeva, the spiritual master. But Mr. Parikh does not come in the Parampara to become the representative of Vyasa. Neither does he have any sound knowledge of Vaishnava principles. I understand from your letter that sometimes discussions on Aurobindo philosophy are done by Mr. Parikh from the Vyasasana. So I am a little surprised. How did you allow like this? I think you should rectify immediately all these mistakes as stated by you in the last two lines of your letter. I think the best thing to do is to stop his class. Nonsense ought not to be tolerated. In a letter from Paris, Tamala Krishna asked Prabhupada philosophical questions about the perfection of the spiritual master, and Prabhupada answered fully but sternly. A spiritual master is always liberated. In any condition of his life, he should not be mistaken as an ordinary human being. This position of the spiritual master is achieved by three processes. One is called sadhana siddha. That means one who is liberated by executing the regulatory principles of devotional service. Another is kripa siddha, one who is liberated by the mercy of Krishna or his devotee. And another is nitya siddha, who is never forgetful of Krishna throughout his whole life. These are the three features of the perfection of life. So far, Narada Muni is concerned, in his previous life he was a maidservant's son, but by the mercy of the devotees, he later on became Siddha. And next life he appeared as Narada with complete freedom to move anywhere by the grace of Lord. So even though he was in his previous life a maidservant's son, there was no impediment in the achievement of his perfect spiritual life. Similarly, any living entity who is conditioned can achieve the perfectional stage of life by the above mentioned processes. And the vivid example is Narada Muni. So, I do not know why you have asked about my previous life, whether I was subjected to the laws of material nature. So, even though accepting that I was subjected to the laws of material nature, does it hamper in my becoming a spiritual master? What is your opinion? From the life of Narada Muni, it is distinct that although he was a conditioned soul in his previous life, there was no impediment of his becoming the spiritual master. This law is applicable not only to the spiritual master, but to every living entity. So far, I am concerned, I cannot say what I was in my previous life. But one great astrologer calculated that I was previously a physician and my life was sinless. Besides that, to corroborate the statement of Bhagavad Gita, Shuchinam Shrimatam Gehe Yoga Brashta Jayate, which means an unfinished yogi takes birth in rich family or born of a Shuchi or pious father. By the grace of Krishna, I got these two opportunities in the present life to be born of a pious father and brought up in one of the richest aristocratic families of Calcutta, Kashinath Malik. The Radha Krishna deity in this family called me to meet him, and therefore, last time when I was in Calcutta, I stayed in that temple along with my American disciples. Although I had immense opportunities to indulge in the four principles of sinful life because I was connected with a very aristocratic family, Krishna always saved me. And throughout my whole life, I do not know what is illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, or gambling. So far, my present life is concerned, I do not remember any part of my life when I was forgetful of Krishna.
Uh,
Prabhupada thought,
enough. I mean, can you just stop? Yeah.
yes,
Jai. So this is a very beautiful description. Prabhupada is very, very humble. At the same time, you can see something very striking. He says, the Radha Krishna deity in this family called me to meet him. Therefore, when I was in Calcutta, last time when I was in Calcutta, I stayed in the temple along with my American disciples. Notice that. Deities called him to come and stay there. And he's talking about how he never, at any point in his life, he doesn't know what is illicit sex. I mean, he didn't, throughout his whole life, he did not indulge in illicit sex, intoxicating, meeting, gambling. And he says, also never forgetful of Krishna. So, although, I mean, this letter is written in a very, look at the Prabhupada's humility when he writes this letter. He's very factually, objectively, very nicely explaining uh, what are the kinds of spiritual masters, and he places himself very humbly. Now, one thing is that generally we know what is sadhana siddha, and then we know what is the eternal associate. Then this kripa siddha is something which is very difficult to understand, which is called extraordinary. Like Abhiram Thakur, one of the associates, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he had this whip, Jai Mangal. And that whip, he would walk around and whip people with that whip. And whoever got whipped by that whip, Jai Mangal, would attain love of God. That's called Kripa Siddha. What all that you needed was, or not all that you needed. You were extremely fortunate if you happened to be in this way and he whipped you with that stick, with that whip, And this morning, you have this, I don't know if how many of you hear it, but you have this PrabhupadaRadio.com, where you hear Prabhupada's lectures and one narration by Amala Bhakta Maharaj. They're like two parallel sequences. Either you can click Prabhupada's lecture or his kirtans going on, or you can click Amala Bhakta Maharaj's narration. So this morning, when I woke up, there was, every morning when I wake up, I try to play that. So sometimes there is Prabhupada singing. So when I want to hear something, so then I click Amala Bhakta Maharaj's narrations. So today he was narrating the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he was in that section where Lord Chaitanya is rescued from the sea. So in that pastime, I mean, first of all, Chaitanya Charitamrita is so nectarian. On top of that, Amala Bhakta Maharaj's narration makes it even more relishable. So in that section, when Lord Chaitanya goes and it says that he ran at the speed of mind and he just jumped into the ocean thinking it is Yamuna. And later on, Sarup Damodar and other associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they go looking for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Finally, on the bank of different associates go different places. Sarup Damodar and others go towards on the beach. And finally, after walking some distance, they see a fisherman ecstatically and continuously, incessantly chanting, shivering, saying, Hari, 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 and then they go and ask him, what happened? So then he has some huge thing on his net. With great difficulty, he's carrying this thing. And then he says, a corpse got stuck in my net. And then he says, it's not a corpse because it's a ghost. And it's Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ecstatic state. He's fully transformed. His limbs are disjointed. And he says, this ghost, his eyes are open and he makes a sound, go, go, and then he says that sometimes he becomes unconscious. So this ghost is very scary, he says, And then he also says that when I normally go out fishing in the night, he's a fisherman. When I go out fishing in the night, because I'm alone and I think that it's dangerous, so I chant the Narasimha prayers. Then he says, but this ghost, when I chant the Narasimha prayers, he becomes double in his strength. So, and then Swarup Damodar, hearing all these descriptions, he knows this is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he tells the fisherman that the fisherman finally tells Swarup Damodar that I need to find an exorcist to remove this ghost from me. The ghost has entered into me, he says, because he's attained love of God. He's shivering at the same time. He's very fearful also of the whole thing, thinking that Lord Chaitanya is a ghost. So then Swarup Damodar says, I am an exorcist. I can relieve you of it. And what he does, he slaps the fisherman 3 times, and then suddenly his fear goes away, and all that he's left with is ecstatic love for Krishna. So this is an example of Kripa Siddha, that he had gone fishing and Lord Chaitanya got stuck in his net. Okay. So on that, I think okay. Yeah. Sorry. On this note, we can end. But I just want to clarify one thing, because although I was clarifying Prabhupada's position and his statements, but the topic that I brought up is a fairly controversial topic, which is are women less intelligent or not? Now, Prabhupada was in the airport. I don't remember which airport it was, and he was waiting to board aircraft, and he saw that some of his women disciples were distributing books at the airport, and Prabhupada looked towards them. Prabhupada was very clear that if we behave according to our upadhis, which is man, woman, Indian, American, if we behave according to our upadhis, then we are materially identifying ourselves. And if we materially identify ourselves, material life is, the Vedic system is stratified, it's hierarchical. So obviously there is a question of who is less intelligent, more intelligent, all these things come up. So Prabhupada's point was that we don't identify either a man as a woman. Whatever body is in, we are just performing the duties according to the situation. But intelligence should come from the words of the spiritual master, Guru Mukha Padma Vakya, Chittete Koryana Aikya. So if one is reading Prabhupada's books and following his teachings, there's no question about a man is more intelligent than a woman. As Prabhupada said, the women also, my women, they're not ordinary women. They have 64 ounces, he said. Just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so we've come to the end of the session. Any further questions or thoughts?
Sorry, Prabhuji, just you mentioned about Prabhupada's radios, right? Like, how can we listen? Where is that's that an app or?
It's a website. It's called PrabhupadaRadio.com. I don't know if there is an app also, but it's called Prabhupada Radio. That's it.
Okay.
Prabhupada, not Prabhupada. Prabhupada Radio.com. That's it.
Okay.
You can't replay anything. It's just like a radio. You'll keep.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's going 24 hours.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Prabhuji. We didn't know that. Okay, I'll try. Thank you.
Anytime that you want to hear Prabhupada, you just go to that site. Sometimes he's singing, sometimes they play some bhajans, and it's always a combination bhajan, kirtan, bhajan lectures. So at any given time, they don't publish a schedule and all that. You go there and you'll see. There it shows what is being played now and what will be played next. That is there. Huh? Okay, this is what is playing. In this many minutes from now, this lecture or this kirtan will start. Similarly, Amar Bhakta Maharaj's narration of Prabhupada's books mostly. Let's say this is what he's narrating, and in this many minutes, the next thing will start like that.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji. That's nice. Yes. Yeah.
And that plays. Even if you are using some other app also, This does not get interrupted. This continuously plays.
Okay. Thank you so much. This helps. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Okay. So thank you all very much for joining. We'll resume next Sunday. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha paritanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Shri Prabhupada ki